Hello. The energy is a little lower today as the spring rain has been coming down all day and kind of dropping the mood as it uh, energizes a lot of the earth and the ground and the mosses already coming back for the spring. So let's see what Rumi has in store for us on this day. One of my very favorites. We've arrived at the reed flute song. So as a little context, if you're not familiar with Rumi, he often uses this metaphor of the reed flute. And it's just this really beautiful way that he works with that idea and that imagery of the connection between the flute player's breath and the reed flute kind of fulfilling its destiny and being animated through that. And in the same way that we're sort of this earth and then animated by the breath of God, the friend, the beloved, the divine, however you want to phrase it. So let's dive into this poem by Rumi. The Reed Flute's Song. Listen to the story by the reed of being separated. Since I was cut from the reed bed, I have made this crying sound. Anyone apart from someone he loves understands what I say. Anyone pulled from a source longs to go back. At any gathering, I am there, mingling in the laughing and grieving. A friend to each, but few will hear the secrets hidden within the notes. No ears for that. Body flowing out of spirit. Spirit up from body. No concealing that mixing. But it's not given us to see the soul. The reed flute is fire, not wind. Be that empty. Hear the love fire tangled in the reed notes as bewilderment melts into wine. The reed is a friend to all who want the fabric torn and drawn away. The reed is hurt and solve combining. Intimacy and longing for intimacy, one song. A disastrous surrender and a fine love together. The one who secretly hears this is senseless. A tongue has one customer, the ear. A sugarcane flute has such effect because it was able to make sugar in the reed bed. The sound it makes is for everyone. Days full of wanting, let them go by without worrying that they do. Stay where you are, inside such a pure, hollow note. Every thirst gets satisfied except that of these fish, the mystics, who swim a vast ocean of grace, still somehow longing for it. No one lives in that without being nourished every day. But if someone doesn't want to hear the song of the reed flute, it's best to cut conversation short, say goodbye, and leave. Just reminded why this is one of my favorites. So many wonderful lines and just beautiful imagery and just this ability that Rumi continues to bring us over and over again, this ability to encapsulate so much with saying so little in a lot of ways, at least in terms of how we would think about the volume of his writing and the directness, or the lack of directness at times, and kind of those things in some ways work together here, where he's being very direct in moments, but a lot of it's sort of mixed in with metaphor. So, so let's start here with this imagery of the reed flute being cut from, the reed flute being cut from the reed bed and making this crying sound, right? And anyone apart from someone he loves understands what I say. right? And so in this case, we can think about this in a lot of different ways, and Rumi's poems, always are operating on multiple levels at once. But here the most obvious translation of that is essentially that we perceive ourselves to be separated from, pulled away from God, from our state as spiritual beings, and separated by coming down to earth into these bodies, right? Being apart from someone we love, and therefore we walk around, and everything we say, all our communications have this undertone of grief and sadness and separation that gets expressed out through us. And often it's not explicit, right? We're not coming out and saying it and expressing it, but it's expressed through our actions in subtle ways, through subtle hints here and there. And then, there's this longing that the reed flute has to return back, right? Return back to its origins, to where it came from, to its rightful place in the world, in the grand cosmos of things. But yet, while it's here, it mingles in with everybody else, and it can provide beauty, and it can share love and be an instrument that allows us to express things in a very unique way. That wouldn't have been possible if that reed flute had stayed in the bed. So I just love this metaphor so much, and I could probably leave it there, but there's two more things that I want to draw out of this one in particular. So first of all, he says here, every thirst gets satisfied except that of these fish, the mystics, right? And so this gets to the mystical path, something I write about a lot over on wingbard.com in my blog, that this path of mysticism doesn't really have an end, right? So if you're looking to kind of reach some sort of conclusion and be satisfied, you're in the wrong place. You're going down the wrong path here, right? The mystic is continually filled, right? Continually getting sustenance from the path, from the search for God, from being surrendered to God. So that's the goal here if we're on the mystical path. And once you kind of are able to fully surrender, you're constantly filled, right? But somehow, even as you continually are filled up by God, you still have a longing for God. And that's sort of where Rumi was in his life, from everything that I understand, and many other mystics throughout time. It's like, yeah, you fully surrender, but you don't stop longing for God, for that connection and grace, as he says here in the poem. So swim in the vast ocean of grace, still somehow longing for it. And then the last bit here is, but if someone doesn't want to hear the song of the reed flute, it's best to cut the conversation short, say goodbye, and leave, right? And we can interpret this in multiple different ways. The first being that if you're in circumstances, you're surrounded by people who are not attuned to the reed song, right? That sad undercurrent of grief and separation, maybe it's not a good use of your time and energy to be in those spaces, right? Additionally, if you're somebody that, doesn't want to hear the song, then you should honor that, right? And it's not a path for everybody. It's not something that everybody is ready for in their lives. And once you start to hear it, once you start to hear that reed flute song of loneliness and separation, you can't unhear it, right? And so there is something here, again, if we go back to thinking about this calling toward the path of mysticism and path toward being a mystic in that way, it's not easy, okay? That there's a bit of a hard fate. I can't quite think of the right word here, but a hard fate that accompanies taking this path, right? Taking the red pill, right? Or the blue pill, who remembers? Anyway, there's no turning back, right? And it can often feel quite lonely to be so acutely attuned to that separation and that loss, and so sensitive to the grief of yourself and those around you. And once you kind of begin to hear that reed flute song, as I said, you can't unhear it. And so if you're not ready, if you're not willing to hear it, then sometimes it's best to leave it be. That's all for today, friends. Much love to you all, and be well.